serious, family court lawyers, what's the most petty behavior you've seen from parents? Client once called me with an emergency. The emergency was that his soon-to-be ex-wife fed the kid Chef Boyardee for dinner. I went to law school for this. The interim court order said that my client, the mom, was not to discuss the court proceedings with the child. During an access visit, the child asked her, "When will I get to see you again?" And my client responded, "We'll have to see. But hopefully soon." The father then argued that this was discussing the court proceedings with the child and tried using it as an excuse to deny any further access. Did it work? No. I sent an angry letter to his lawyer and he backed off. As an intern, I saw a couple have long, hateful emails about who was going to keep a unisex Armani hoodie. Almost all of their discussions centered on that one hoodie. When in the end the husband got to keep it, the wife cut holes into it which ruined it. It was pretty nice GBH. What I get from this is that if you ever divorce someone really petty, put a lot of focus on a few random items you don't actually care about. Father wanted full custody of his child. Child was in full mother's custody. Child has diabetes. Both parents must fill a daily glucose intake measured by glucometer. Every time father dropped the child at mom's, he would buy a Snickers or Twix on the way there and feed it to the kid. Then we flipped out the glucose measurings during court. Due to the measurings being extremely high when the child was at mom's, we were able to get the child to the father's full custody. I didn't know what he was doing. I certainly didn't advise him to do it. He just bring it to the courthouse and ordered me to present it. Either that or that time where during divorce a guy had exact knowledge of how many toilet paper sheets his wife was overusing and how many liters of warm water she overused. My GF is a family lawyer. She had a pair from Eastern Europe, we're in Ontario, who wanted a divorce. Long fight over what the husband's assets were. He claimed to be living on less than $12,000 cash year. Wife hired a private detective. Eventually found that he was hiding another home. Won a big settlement. My GF is really happy. Note, she doesn't get a penny of the settlement or bonus or extra pay, she just liked seeing the liar caught. But the wife still isn't happy. Claims the husband is hiding even more money. Keeps badgering him with more legal stuff. Even though my GF is telling her you won. Let it be. Then, husband hires a pie. Finds out the wife is joint owner of another house with her new boyfriend. Settlement invalidated. My GF immediately got off the record and refused to help the woman anymore. Repeatedly taking the kids to CPS and trying to get them to accuse the teenager of rape. Every medical record makes it clear that the mother was the only one doing any talking. What's worse, she was a social worker trained to interview child sex victims professionally. I'm just an intern. But I once was sifting through discovery that our client provided as he was trying to win custody over his son. One of these pieces of discovery was a detailed account of the mother's timeliness. Basically, if the mother was late to pick up her son, they would time it and document it. Which would make sense if it was significant. But I'm not exaggerating. Over a 6-month period, she was late for a total of 33 minutes. Seeing as they met to exchange the child 3 times a week, it means she was late by about 1 or 2 minutes once a week. It was the most insignificant piece of data that I have ever seen in my entire life. But the client was adamant that we use it in court to prove that the mother was irresponsible. The worst I was ever a part of. In California we have certain requirements to meet before one parent can move away with a child. This requirements kick in when the other parent's visitation will be materially impacted by the move. My client is mom. She is a dental hygienist. She has kids with dentist 1 and divorces dad for dentist 2. She wants to move with the kids to dentist 2's town so she can work for him, live closer to work, etc. Dentist 2's town is a 25-minute drive away from dentist 1's town. 25 minutes. Between the two of them, the two dentists must have spent nearly $400K fighting over a 25-minute move. This was also the moment I realized I made a terrible mistake becoming a lawyer when I should have become a dentist. Bonus: saddest behavior I have personally seen. Mom creating fake sexual abuse stories and dropping hints to the pediatrician, in turn causing the pediatrician to call CPS about dad. All worked out in the end. Mom lost custody because of her actions after it all came out. Double bonus: funniest thing I ever saw. Rich breadwinning wife refused to pay husband spousal support because those laws were written to protect housewives. He's not a housewife. This is insane. Family law legal assistant here. A client of ours included a chunk of pork in the freezer in her list of assets that she insisted she get back. The lawyer on the other side came back with respectfully, "I'm not going to argue over second-hand meat in a freezer. I practice law, not usually family law. But I have a case of my own right now. My grade school-aged son took an entrance exam for a gifted student program. He has been offered a spot in the program, but it will require switching to a different school within the district next year if he joins. The program is well regarded in town. One person whose kids went through it described it to me as a quality private school education for free. I have to go to court in a few weeks to argue over whether our son should join the program. His mother, who signed him up for the test and called it the most important day of his life, has now decided he shouldn't join it. I don't know why. She's made some half-hearted arguments that he couldn't handle it, and that she'd have to do too much driving. But I suspect it's just because I'm in favor of it. This is getting me really down. It's a great opportunity for our son, and she just doesn't want to agree. The ex-husband didn't want to pay what he owed his ex-wife. He thought he could duck her over by dragging on the process with appeals. He was not only hurting her but also his children. She desperately needed the money, and he knew that. Him dragging the process caused her to lose her job and have to move back with her parents. But once he paid, she not only moved out, but bought a house. No, not just like applied for a loan and got a house. Straight out paid cash for a full house. In the end, he not only had to pay the full amount of what he owed, but child support, his lawyer fees and her lawyer fees. I have been in family law for over a decade, and the most petty thing I have ever seen happen was that the wife from an affluent divorcing family had several trees planted on one side of a fence on the property, and the husband wanted them planted on the other side of the exact same fence, about 5 feet from where the wife had them planted. He insisted that we file contempt against the wife for said tree plantings. They spent close to $50,000 in legal fees arguing over the stupid trees. It was incredulous. I have stories upon stories of people's pettiness, but this one will always stand out for me. Another really petty one was a dad buying a money order for child support every month but not actually giving them to the mom. He gave us copies of all of the money orders he bought as evidence of the support he paid, but she claimed she had never received them. Well, that seemed stupid, but no, he had actually just kept them and then, like an idiot, gave the original month's old money order to the mom to pay for the outstanding child support balance. He was definitely found in contempt. People can be really ridiculous. Worked in an attorney's office for a little bit. Knew about a divorce case one of the attorneys was involved in where the child had been diagnosed with a terminal disease with maybe a few years left, and the parents tried to fight over what the child's wish should be for one of those Make-A-Wish type of foundations. I do know the judge chewed both parents a new one when this issue came up, but ultimately could not make a call on how the wish would be granted. I believe the child ending up refusing the wish on account of the argument it caused between the parents. Just hearing about the details of this case stuck me up for a while. Edit. Formatting. Parents didn't let a kid get his college education because they were fighting over who was going to pay it. This includes co-signing on the predatory loans that everyone was rushing to sign up for. The judge asked why either one didn't bring this up 6 months earlier when they knew he was starting college. Both of them gave the same answer except from their perspective. Something like the other parent is to blame because they didn't tell the parent about the bills. Apparently both knew about the bills and the deadlines for the previous 3 months and expected the other to pay for it. The case wasn't raised in court until after the deadline for the next semester had passed. The kid probably was forced to take loans on his own. God only knows his situation now. The parents ended up spending the same amount as the tuition each in lawyer fees just for them both to have to pay half the tuition. Never get divorced. This happened in January. Guy was straight out of jail, 2 years, and of course at that point, his marriage was rocky as hell. When his wife dropped his kids off to visit, he lived with his parents for parole purposes. The son said his uncle hit him. The father then filed a PFA against the wife and uncle. It was granted. Then he files for sole custody. It was granted. The kids were in his custody for about 2 months before the custody hearing. Of course, my boss threw me the file and I had to handle the mediation and last minute prep. At mediation, the father and wife sit angry-eyed. Literally. Each cross-armed and furious. The other lawyer and I discuss the facts and what arrangement each client wants briefly in another room. We come out and our clients are gone. Magically. And praise the Lord. In the course of 10 minutes of me and the lawyer talking, the father and mother made out in the corner of the hallway and returned. The case was dropped. May I mention? This was pro bono? PA jurisdiction. 2. When I was a kid and my parents were divorcing, my dad filed many lawsuits against my mother for anything and everything. When I was 10 years old, he even told me he was going to take me to court in a lawsuit because I didn't want to go visit him. I've seen some itch as pettiness, but the best story I have is actually from my guardian ad litem professor. When she was practicing, she had a client whose ex-wife was super duper nal about getting all of the children's clothes back from his house when she got the kids back from him. Like, if one sock was left behind all hell would break loose. So this guy's solution was to make the children strip naked in the foyer and put on clothes specifically worn at his place when it was his turn to have them. Then when they went back to mom's, they had to strip naked again and change back into the clothes she sent them there in. $3,000 between me and another very good lawyer to argue about $13 month versus $30 month child support. They had 50/50 custody. The kid was 13. Even after I did the math for my client explaining they were paying me more than the difference for the entire rest of child support, they still wanted to do it. When I was in law school I worked on a case involving the parents of a victim of Sandy Hook. They were divorced prior to losing their child but were still fighting over child support several years later. They were fighting over who got to keep the victim's compensation fund proceeds for the death of their 6-year-old. They were insanely rich. So it wasn't about the money. It was about getting a win over their former spouse. It wasn't so much petty that they were fighting over it, but the way they were fighting over it. Using the death of their baby to score points against that baby's other parent, and the other children were stuck in the middle of this shit show. Incredibly petty but much more depressing than anything else. Worst case I've ever worked on. As an intern in law school I saw a case where the father was likely going to get an unfavorable custody and support arrangement, so he claimed the mother was unfit. His basis? She's into kinky sex and has a new boyfriend. He insisted on telling the court specifically what she likes in bed, even though he admitted that the children never saw or were subjected to any of these sexual acts. He did it just to embarrass the mother. Worked in a law firm dealing in family matters. Couple hammers out a separation agreement over months of meetings, mediation, letters and drafts back and forth. Ended up having to take it to court because they couldn't agree on who would get the air miles. The ducking air miles. When my parents divorced, I was 4 at the time. My dad told my mom he didn't want custody as long as he could keep their CD collection. That was until he realized how much he would have to pay in child support. He had me 2 days a week until I showed my court-appointed counselor how to tell if you had poured a full shot of whiskey. I don't have much memory of this, but he apparently would take me to happy hour at a local bar and then to pawn shops to look at guns. Full custody was given to my mom, who moved us out of state. I don't speak with him anymore. Canadian family lawyer here. Many instances of pettiness. Generally, good family lawyers will call their client on their bullshit. We don't want to be the lawyer standing in front of a judge over really petty things. Reputation is important. Client, my son is very mature for his age. I believe access to his mother should be per his discretion. Me, your 2-year-old son. That said, I've had people call my office yelling that my client wouldn't allow them to pick up the infant child at 10 p.m. Only 4 hours late for a visit. One guy fired 2 previous lawyers and retained me to negotiate, adding 3 meaningless words to a settlement. We're talking months of intense negotiations between counsel. One parent refused to allow another parent to take kids on vacation because they wanted to take the child to Disney first. Despite, not having the funds to do so. The most petty are the parents who phone CAS, Child Protection Services, or the police for every minor disagreement. Your 2-year-old cries when leaving your home? Call Child Protection Services. Upon losing the house because he literally locked my mom out of their bedroom, garage, home office, and shed, my dad decided the house only meant the wood and brick. He took whatever appliances he could fit and, just for good measure, ripped the carpeting out of the bedroom. Or that he tried taking all of the family photos, including the ones of her relatives, without her notice. She only found them because he forgot to lock the office door and I lied about locking it when he called to check. Big dig. One guy was a total control freak. He'd gone to the Philippines and romanced his now ex-wife. Brought her back to Australia and then expected her to be a slave for him. Pop out his kids. etc. When she left him, he manipulated her into believing that they would share care of the kids. And they didn't need court orders. Then behind her back he went to court, obtained sole custody of the kids and basically cut her out. Then when she was back on her feet and could finally go back to court and try to get her kids back, he said she was a prostitute. Among other things. He said the kids were learning sexualized behavior from her. Despite the fact that he was living in a trailer caravan modified shipping container, something like that. With no actual walls between the kids' room and the bedroom he shared with his new partner. And the mother was living in a house with bedrooms and doors. Real nice guy. In the end, he didn't use a lawyer. So he was completely steamrolled in court. His court documents were laughable. Literally everything that had ever gone wrong with the kids was the mother's fault, and he now sees the kids once a fortnight instead of having them live with him full time. So there's a way not to do things. Also, hilariously, one of the things he said in court was that he knew when he was impregnating the mother, because he can control his ejaculation. Right. Client's spouse of decades gets a terminal cancer diagnosis about halfway into a fairly routine medium-high asset divorce. My client is such a viciously horrible person, saying they were glad that the spouse was dying, that the opposing party's literal dying wishes to be divorced and never see a spouse of 30+ years again.